Good evening, everyone. I'm Vivienne Benesch, Producing Artistic Director, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to the second episode of our PlayMakers Keeping You Company series, Think Like an Actor with the one and only Ray Dooley. After over 30 plus years and more than 100 productions as one of the great luminaries on stage at PlayMakers, in the classroom at UNC Chapel Hill, and throughout the Greater Triangle community, he was also the first out of the gate to propose something to share with our community for your virtual entertainment. And Ray being Ray, the first episode was such a success that he has agreed to keep it going as a multi-episode series. So stay tuned for the box set, for those of you that remember what a box set is. If you missed the first episode, exploring Hamlet's to be or not to be, you can view it anytime on the PlayMakers YouTube channel. The link to that is on our website, and I believe that Rosalie Preston just put it into the chat as well. Tonight, Ray will lead us through Act 3, Scene 1 of Hamlet, the famous Get Thee to a Nunnery scene, and help us understand all the questions to ask and the clues to look for as an actor prepares to tread the boards in Shakespeare's most famous play. If you'd like to follow along, the text of the scene will also appear in the chat box. Speaking of the chat, while you won't be able to speak to me directly or to Ray while he's talking, please do find the chat button at the bottom of your screen and write in any questions you might have. You can do this at any point during the class. It won't interrupt, I promise. I will use some of those questions to facilitate a short question and answer with Ray when he is done. So without further ado, it is my great privilege to pass this off to a man who, with over 50 Shakespearean roles in his repertoire, needs no introduction at all, Ray Dooley.
Thanks, Viv.
Mwah. Have fun.
Welcome, everybody. So glad you're with us tonight. Tonight, we will explore thinking like an actor in the Nunnery scene, which actually follows right on from To Be or Not to Be. You may remember last time we talked about Hamlet coming out on stage by himself and with the help of the audience, coming to some conclusion about why he has not yet killed Claudius. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. But soft you now, the fair Ophelia. Here we go. Before we begin on this adventure with Hamlet and Ophelia, we will look at what an actor thinks about in preparing for a scene like this. Actors use the term given circumstances to explain what's going on in the scene. What time of day is it? What is the backstory, which is a phrase that we use in film a lot. So I'm going to sketch that in very quickly so we know what the reality is when Hamlet and Ophelia confront each other. Here, first of all, the place, it's an open hall, it's a large room in the palace. To go back, in Act 1, we learned from Hamlet's line, but 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2. He's talking about his father's death. So that was 2 months. In Act 2 and 3, we learn from something that is said in the next scene, nay, 'tis twice 2 months, my lord. So we're now 2 months after we were in Act 1. Now in Act 1, a couple of things have happened. One, Hamlet's father's ghost appears to him and says, revenge, this foul and most unnatural murder. Murder most foul, as in the best it is, but this most foul, strange, and unnatural. Also, we learn in Act 1, Scene 3, Ophelia is talking to her brother, Laertes, and they have some very witty banter where Ophelia holds her own with her brother. And then in comes her father. And her father learns that Ophelia has been receiving the attentions of Prince Hamlet. And she says, "My lord, he has tendered love to me in honorable fashion." And Polonius says, "No, Lord Hamlet is a prince out of thy star. This must not be." And he tells her to shut off all communication with Hamlet. And she says, "My lord, I will obey." So what we know is that for 2 months, Ophelia has been, if Hamlet wants to see her, she won't see him. If he sends her something, a note, sends it back. So in the term of modern day terms, this is what we call, I think, ghosting. Yes, you know, where we end whatever the relationship is by a text message and then radio silence. It's kind of like that. So for 2 months, understand that on the same day, Hamlet learned back then that his uncle killed his father. His mother is now married to his father. And the ghost implies that the reason for this is lust. As the ghost says, "For virtue, though it never will be moved, though lewdness court it in the shape of heaven, so lust, though to a radiant angel linked, will sate itself in a celestial bed and prey on garbage." A singular take on relations, particularly sexual relations. So Hamlet takes all this in. On the same day, the young woman that he has been paying a kind of court to shuts him down completely. So his mother has committed what he thinks is moral degradation. The younger woman no longer sees him. This has been going on for 2 months as Hamlet, with this burden of trying to revenge his father, carries forward. So here we are in Act 2. What we know happened the day before, we find this out in Act 2, Scene 1. Ophelia comes rushing in. She's all upset. And her father, Polonius, says, "Well, what happened?" She says, "My lord, as I was sewing in my closet, Lord Hamlet, his doublet all unbraced, no hat upon his head, his stockings fouled and downjived to his ankles, pale as his shirt, he comes before me." And Polonius says, "Mad for thy love?" She says, "My lord, I do not know, but truly I do fear it." She then tells her father that Hamlet doesn't say a word. He takes her by the wrist. He took me by the wrist and held me hard. And with his hand thus o'er his brow, he fell to such perusal of my face as he would draw it. Then he lets her go, and he looks at her deeply. He's trying to see something in her. He nods 3 times. And then he turns, and as she says, he found his way out of doors without his eyes, for to the end he bended their light on me. So this happened yesterday. Hamlet paid an unexpected visit to Ophelia in her rooms, in her closet, as the phrase is. So this is the last time she's seen him. Now, we've learned from right before To Be or Not to Be that this is a setup. Polonius and Claudius have engineered this meeting between Hamlet and Ophelia. They are in fact hiding behind the arras, the curtain, drapery at one side of the room. They've given Ophelia a book, a prayer book. Polonius says, Ophelia, take thou this book, that doing so may color your loneliness. So here's a reason for you to be here. Now, all right, so if you're playing Hamlet, what you know is, as Claudius says in that earlier scene, we have closely sent for Hamlet hither, that he, as 'twere by accident, may here affront Ophelia. They want to find out what's wrong with Hamlet. Is it love that is so upsetting him? So this is the setup. Hamlet has come on stage. His mind is full of this idea about why to be or not to be. Why can't I do this? And suddenly there's Ophelia. So imagine someone you haven't seen in 2 months, except for a remarkable and singular episode the day before. Completely disheveled. The depression that he's feeling, he's fighting it. It's getting the better of him. He had to see her. He was a mess, as people in a kind of depression are. So there she is. She's reading on a prayer book. It doesn't say prayer book, but it's a book. She's reading. In the iconography of art, oftentimes a woman reading on a prayer book is reminiscent of the Virgin Mary at the Annunciation. And a little announcement here, the scholarship that I'm using is Professor Harold Jenkins in The Arden, Shakespeare. This is one of his observations. Because Hamlet says, Nymph, in thy orisons be all my sins remembered. Why does he think of his own sins? Well, he, like the rest of the world, is fallen in a sinful state, as we will see as this scene progresses. Nymph, in thy orisons be all my sins remembered. So now let's turn to Ophelia. Here she is. She knows this is a setup. She knows what happened the day before. If you're the actress playing Ophelia, you'll need to decide how she feels about being here. Is she participating because her father told her to? Is she participating because she hopes that by playing this trick on Hamlet, he may be cured? It'll make a difference. She responds, and that doesn't mention the 2 months of no contact. She doesn't mention the event from the day before. She says, good, my lord, how does your honor for this many a day? Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Hamlet answers, I humbly thank you. Well, all right, let's stop there for a minute. This is the same answer that he gives later in the play, both to the Polish captain, I believe, he meets in Act 4, a stranger, and the same response he gives to Osric in Act 5. It's a very formal, I'm fine, thanks. You'll notice on your script, if you're looking, that it says, I humbly thank you, well, well, well. So we now get into some textual variants, which is something else as actors we think about. If we are playing Hamlet, we know that there are at least 2 versions that we need to consider. There is what we call the quarto version, which imagine a big sheet of paper, quarto, so 4, folded this way, folded this way. If it's folded again, it's octavo because it's 8. anyway, think of it like a paperback that was published soonish after the play was presented, and because there are no copyrights, so it was a way of controlling what was printed. Now there was a first quarto, which is it's called the it's called the bad quarto, because it sounds like somebody tried to simply remember what the play was about and wrote down, and it's very inaccurate. But there's the second quarto, and then there's the folio, which is the bound version that came out in 1623, which many people swear by. But with Hamlet, the second quarto and the folio have many, many differences. And the second quarto actually has more lines in it than the folio does. We lose, for example, hoist in his own petard in the folio, which is in the second quarto. Scholars think, and it may well be right, that this well was an actor's emendation, that an actor playing Hamlet, whether it was Richard Burbage, who played the first Hamlet, or another actor before 1623. So you get, I humbly thank you. Well, or something like that. So the whole scene stops while we do the well bit, right? Personally, I like the quarto version, which is, I humbly thank you, well, which has more to do with, hello, haven't seen you in 2 months. We had that odd encounter yesterday that we're not talking about and that maybe I'm a little embarrassed about, but okay. So here you are. What do you have to say to me? So there's a moment between the two of them. Ophelia, who really is admirable in this scene, she does her best. Okay, here I go. She says, my lord, I have remembrances of yours that I have longed long to redeliver. I pray you now, receive them. Apparently, she has brought with her remembrances. Are they letters? Is it a piece of jewelry or two? How big is the stack? Is it tied in a bow? Now, if you're thinking like an actor, if you're playing Ophelia, you're going to be thinking about this early on. You're going to be deciding what those items are. You may even ask your Hamlet to write some letters in there so you know what those letters are, if they are letters. Maybe it's as I said, jewelry. We don't know what it is, but as actors, we have to decide. We also notice that Polonius has handed her a book, which she apparently is reading. So if you're thinking like an actor, you're saying, okay, I've got a book I'm supposed to be reading, and I've got these remembrances that I'm supposed, so where, okay, so when I talk to the costume designer early on, I either need to know that I have a pocket in my dress to put the remembrances, or what am I going, how am I going? And there's another question. Does Polonius know that Ophelia has brought these? Or is this something she has taken her own initiative to bring? Important question if you're thinking like an actor and playing Ophelia. So Ophelia and Hamlet now have two items, her book and the remembrances. Let's say, for sake of argument, that we have 5 folded over letters. We know he sends letters because Polonius, in his charming way, quotes one in Act 2, Scene 2. So here they are, and they've got these things. So this is now, let's go into the rehearsal hall as the actor playing Hamlet and the actor playing Ophelia decide where these things are going to go. So let's assume that Ophelia, when Hamlet comes in, she puts down the book. So that's out of the way. We don't need the book again. She now has the remembrances. I pray you now receive them, she says. Looks to hand them to Hamlet. Hamlet says, no, not I. I never gave you aught. I never gave you anything. Well, he did. So if you're playing Hamlet, how are you going to say that and believe what you're saying? Either you're, what's the phrase, jerking her chain, or something else is going on. When I was considering this, I thought of the worldview that Hamlet now has, yeah? That the world, because of the murder of his father and what, more importantly, what his mother has done, the moral catastrophe that she and her action have brought upon the world, that Hamlet, that Hamlet was a different person before the moral catastrophe than he is now. And so when he says, no, not I never gave you aught. I, the person I am now, the person I recognize as living in this world that is a moral catastrophe. That wasn't me who gave you those things. Ophelia, hearing that, trying to do the best she can, she says, my lord, you know right well you did. And with them words of so sweet breath composed as made the things more rich. The perfume lost, take these again. For to the noble mind, rich gifts wax poor when givers prove unkind. There, my lord. All right, let's unpack that just for a second. Again, she's doing the best she can. He's saying things that don't make any sense. Of course, she knows he gave them to her. She's not quite following his inner reasoning. So she said, oh, please, come on. And meanwhile, she knows she's in this very awkward situation where her dad and the king are over there, but listening to all this, particularly if this is something she took her own initiative. And how are they going to take the fact that she actually took her own initiative to bring these things to give back to him? She maybe, if you're thinking like an actor, you may say, I'd like to give these things to him and maybe I'd like to leave now. But he won't take them. So she says, there, my lord. So let's go back to the rehearsal room. What does that mean? Does she, let's take a few possibilities. Does she hold them out and he just looks at them? Does she put them down somewhere on a table? Does she toss them at his feet the way Malvolio tosses the ring in front of Viola? There it sits in your eye. It'd be worth stooping for. If not, let it be his that finds it. From Twelfth Night. It's a big question that those two actors will solve in the rehearsal hall. We have coming up an extraordinarily text-heavy scene for Hamlet, a scene that might bring forth some strong emotion. We might not want to be holding on to a prop while we are playing the rest of this scene. So it may well be that Ophelia holds out and says, my lord, I have remembrances of yours that I have longed to redeliver. I pray you now receive them. Hamlet says, no, not I. I never gave you aught. My honored lord, you know right well you did. With them words of so sweet breath composed as made the things more rich, their perfume lost, take these again. For to the noble mind, rich gifts wax poor when givers prove unkind. And that rhymed couplet may help us help us as actress playing Ophelia. I'm done. I put a couplet on it. I'm done. Here, there, my lord. I'm putting it over here on the table. I'm heading out. So perhaps she heads out and she starts to walk away. Hamlet looks at what's there, looks at her. He goes, ha, are you honest? He stops. Very interesting thing happens in the scene at this point. Up to this point, the scene has been written in iambic pentameter, in verse. My lord, I have remembrances of yours that I have longed to re-deliver. Yeah? From this point, except for Ophelia's final speech after Hamlet leaves, it's all in prose. Now, what does that mean? Well, for an actor, it means that we notice that. Prose has rhythm, but no meter. So Shakespeare has a lot more freedom in how he can approach this as he's writing. And some of the greatest of Shakespeare is in prose. We think of Beatrice and Benedict, which is mostly in prose, but Falstaff, all of those are in prose. And the thing switches. And for Hamlet, in the next scene, which we'll talk about in a minute, I speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you trippingly on the tongue. All of that scene with the players is still in prose. It doesn't switch back to verse until he calls his friend Horatio over and says, Horatio, thou art e'en as just a man as e'er my conversation coped withal. And we're back in verse at that point. So if we're thinking like an actor, we go, okay, something's changing. Ha, are you honest? Says Hamlet, stopping Ophelia. Now, honest can mean our meaning, but at this time, it also carried the meaning of chaste. There's a double meaning, and this is probably the time to introduce the idea that this idea of sexual corruption, of moral calamity, is pervading this world as Hamlet experiences it. We'll go further into this, but let's not right now. Let's keep moving. So there's already that double entendre. Are you honest? Ophelia stops. Remember now, Hamlet would, if you're playing Ophelia, you think, okay, what does she do? Who is she? What do I know about her? Well, the first thing we might say is that Hamlet, who is very, as we hear Ophelia describe him in a minute, he is the observed of all observers, the expectancy and rose of the fair state. The people love him. Claudius says to Laertes in Act 4, I can't kill him. The people love him. He's charismatic. He's the glass of fashion and the mold of form. All right. So it's not likely that, let's say it can't play a negative. It is likely that a woman that he would be interested in would have some interest. Would be an interesting young woman. Yeah. Educated. Has spirit. And we see with her brother, she's not afraid to give and take. So there's something in this young woman. She's got a spine and she's trying her best. And he says, are you honest? So she hears that and she says, my lord. He says, are you fair? Okay, we're playing puzzles, she thinks, right? She says, what means your lordship? Hamlet says that if you be honest and fair, your honesty should admit no discourse to your beauty. Now, what's he saying? That if you be honest, let's say chaste and beautiful, your honesty, that part of you that is honest, should admit no discourse to your beauty. I'm borrowing from Professor Jenkins here, and I think he's right. Hamlet is saying your chasteness should admit no discourse to your beauty. Guys who think you're beautiful will try to talk to you. Your honesty should cut that off. Again, going back to this whole idea of relations between men and women, his mother, starting up. Ophelia slightly misunderstands him, or misunderstands him on purpose to challenge him. She says, could beauty, my lord, have better commerce than with honesty? What she's saying is, he says your honesty should admit no discourse to your beauty. She takes it to mean that beauty and honesty should not talk at all within a person. She says, could beauty, my lord, have better commerce than with honesty? In other words, beauty might lead one to loose behavior, and so could we have better conversation, commerce, than with honesty? Wouldn't that be a good thing? So a rehearsal question is, does she misunderstand him, or does she intentionally misunderstand him to challenge him a little bit? Have better commerce than with honesty, she asks. And Hamlet comes back with this. Aye, truly, for the power of beauty will sooner transform honesty from what it is to a bawd, that is to say, someone who runs a brothel, than the force of honesty can translate beauty into his likeness, into honesty's likeness. Hamlet's saying, I don't care how honest you are. If you're beautiful, you're done, morally. Again, this moral sickness that is in him is coming out. He then says, this was sometimes a paradox, but now the time gives it proof. A while ago, before my mother did what she did, this would be a contradiction. But now the time gives it proof. These are the times we're living in, that anything beautiful is going to be corrupted. Now the time gives it proof. Oh. And then he looks at her. Maybe because he just spoke of that previous time when it was a paradox, and he says, I did love you once. It's an offering, clarification, a memory that comes to him that he shares with her. And she says, again, a negotiation here. Indeed, my lord, you made me believe so. Sure seemed like it from where I was sitting back then. So again, they're trying to make contact in a way. But Hamlet turns immediately. And he says, you should not have believed me. For virtue cannot so inoculate our old stock, but we shall relish of it. I loved you not. All right, that one we're going to unpack, okay? It's an image and a metaphor from husbandry. Imagine a tree that we cut a branch off of, and we graft that that branch, we try to graft it onto an old stock. Okay? The old stock here is original sin. For virtue cannot so inoculate our old stock, that rotten thing that is humanity, because of original sin that my mother is now bringing forward into the world, and that we are all in this fallen world polluted by. Virtue, no matter how virtuous we are, cannot so inoculate our old stock, but we shall relish of it. Relish here meaning smell or stink. No matter how virtuous we are, we all stink of sinfulness, original sin. Wow. For virtue cannot so inoculate our old stock, but we shall relish of it. I loved you not, he said. In truth, I was incapable of love because of this fallen world, this moral catastrophe in which we find ourselves. She's taking this in, doing her best. And she says, I was the more deceived. If that was true, then it sure sounded good to me, or something like that. If you're thinking like an actor, you're trying, you're reaching out, and still leaving an opening. Is that really what you mean? Maybe is the action she's playing there. And at this point, we get the first of 5 iterations of get thee to a nunnery. All right, let's stop and look at that just for a second. I've got very little time left, so we'll keep going. Get thee to a nunnery. Okay, so there's a book called Shakespeare's Body by Eric Partridge. And in that book, a nunnery is called slang for a brothel. And so some people, whether from wanting to inject a little naughty frisson of something into the scene, believe that Hamlet is telling her to go to a brothel. I think everything in the play militates against that. What he is saying is go to a place of refuge from sexual relations, from sinfulness. Get thee to a nunnery because of all that stuff I was just talking about our old sinfulness. Get thee to a nunnery. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? Why would you bring forth children into this world? Or as Professor Jenkins likes it, why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? I like it the other way, which is the way it is in all the other texts. Why wouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? Very real question. Get thee to a nunnery. Don't procreate, because this world stinks. He goes on, why would thou be a breeder of sinners? I am myself indifferent honest. I'm a pretty good guy. Yet I could accuse me of such things, it were better my mother had not borne me. I am very proud, revengeful, ambitious, with more offenses at my beck than I have thoughts to put them in, imagination to give them shape, or time to act them in. What should such fellows as I do, crawling between earth and heaven? We are arrant knaves, all. Believe none of us. Go thy ways to a nunnery. All right. So this dam in him is starting to crack. And all of this thing, he says in Act 1, I have that within which passes show. It's like this pressure in his, he literally feels visceral pressure of this thing. How am I going to, I've been charged to kill him. I can't do that. My mother has done this awful thing. And now we see this start to crack. And he says, we are arrant with knaves all. Don't believe any man, anything that a man would say. Don't believe it, because we are arrant knaves all. And then the hinge of the scene, the turning point. He says, we are arrant knaves all, believe none of us. Go thy ways to a nunnery. Then he says, where's your father? So, if you're thinking like an actor, you think, where does that come from? Now, there is great debate about whether at this point Hamlet realizes that Claudius and that somebody is listening in. Sometimes it is even so blatant as Polonius actually does this, and Hamlet catches a good glimpse of it. There's probably not. In Shakespeare, when somebody is listening in, we are told that they're listening in. And it is not necessary for Hamlet to catch a glimpse, at least as I was playing it. Hamlet may suddenly realize that this young woman, who he has not been allowed to see for the last 2 months, is here by herself. And that may prompt his question. Where's your dad? What are you doing here by yourself? As he thinks about it, it's like, wait a minute. Where's your dad? How come you're out here by yourself after 2 months? So that could prompt the question. Ophelia then is at a crossroads. And she has to decide whose side she's on, what she's going to answer. And she answers, at home, my lord. So if you're the actress playing Ophelia, is it pressure from dad? Is it your hope that this small lie, if it is a small lie, will in the end be for Hamlet's good? It's a huge question for the actress playing Ophelia. And as this is the hinge of the scene, I think what I'll do, because we're very close to time, so I'm going to do my best to play out the rest of the scene, and maybe we'll come back to this next time. At home, my lord, she says, Hamlet says, and let the doors be shut upon him, that he may play the fool nowhere but in his own house. Farewell. And Hamlet starts to leave. Ophelia, watching him leave, says, help him, you sweet heavens. She thinks he's lost his mind. There's something deeply wrong with him. He turns to her and says, remember, he's told her to go to a nunnery, right, where she's not going to procreate. He turns and he says, if thou dost marry, as opposed to the thing I advised you to do, if thou dost marry, I'll give thee this plague for thy dowry. Be thou as chaste as ice, as pure as snow. Thou shalt not scape calumny. No matter how well you behave, people are going to say nasty things about you. Get thee to a nunnery. Farewell. And then he starts to go, but no, something else comes into his mind. And he comes back and he says, if thou wilt needs marry, in other words, if your physical feelings make you need to marry, marry a fool. For wise men know well enough what monsters you make of them. By monsters, he means cuckolds. This is common in Shakespeare. A cuckolded husband was seen to have antlers on his head, horned, common thing in Shakespeare, both in comedy and tragedy. And that's what he means. Wise men know well enough what monsters you make of them. To a nunnery go, and this time he adds, and quickly too, farewell. he starts to leave. Ophelia now, again, oh, heavenly powers, restore him. Restore him. And Hamlet turns, I have heard of your paintings too, well enough, and the dam just breaks. God has given you one face, and you make yourselves another. He's talking about women's makeup. You jig, you amble, and you lisp. You nickname God's creatures and make your wantonness your ignorance. Go to, I'll no more on't. It hath made me mad. I say, we will have no more marriages. Those that are married already, all but one, shall live. Meaning Claudius. The rest shall keep as they are. To a nunnery. Go. And he leaves. All right. I think in the interests of leaving time for question and answer, we'll stop there for now. So, Viv.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
It's impossible. It's just, I just want you to keep going. Like, oh my Lord. But I do think, and I'd love people to sort of weigh in on the chat here, if you'd like another episode where you take, to keep us going through line by line with this, or to move on to yet another part. But I'd love to know what people's thoughts are, because now I want you to pick apart the second half from the hinge on. A couple of questions have come through, and one that I'm particularly interested in too, and this whole idea of Hamlet feigning madness or not feigning madness. And where do you sort of fall in this scene on that sort of trajectory? Where do you think Hamlet is at this moment? Is part of it a performance for her and possibly for Polonius and Claudius?
Yeah, I don't think so personally. That's just my personal take on the scene, playing it. That the behavior that is exhibited is a product of the pressure that he is living under. I personally don't think that he is intentionally performing this. We notice that as soon as, well, first of all, Ophelia says, blasted with ecstasy, that he seems genuine. She believes that he's genuinely mad, and he says that. And Claudius says right after, what he spoke, though it lacked form a little, was not like madness. So for me, it is it's justified that it is a breaking of a dam, and these feelings are given language, and Ophelia, as a woman, becomes the kind of exemplar, and then bears the brunt of this, and poor Ophelia, and she gets the full fury of it.
Yeah. It's interesting to me often that for me, I think in this scene, it may be what drives him mad, and certainly what drives her mad. It's for both of them, sort of what their journeys are from here on out are very different. But
right.
This is
right.
that opportunity.
They come together at the play within a play and have some polite, banter with heavy sexual undertones. And then that night, Hamlet kills her dad. She's thrown her lot in with her dad in this ruse with Hamlet, and then that night, Hamlet kills him. So that might be enough. The next time we see her is in Act 4 with the flowers and the mad scene. Right.
Yeah. Oof. Question from Wendy Waugh, just about the relationship between the dramaturg and an actor. How do you use a dramaturg's expertise in the world of rehearsing?
Yes. Well, it depends on whether it's a new play or not. If it's a new play, the dramaturg is working with the playwright to make sure that the play is as clear as possible, that the playwright is saying what the playwright wants to say in the best possible way. In a classic play, if you're doing Shakespeare and you have a dramaturg, the dramaturg will be supplying research materials, will be supplying the various texts, the folio, the quartos, might be suggesting readings, not readings, but in other words, if there's an alternate reading based on a different text, bringing that up if the actor already hasn't done that, and working closely with the director, again, to be sure the clarity of the piece is coming forward, taking care that the text is as clear as possible. And it might mean a note to the director. It might mean asking the voice and speech coach to make something, can we make that a little clearer? Mm-hmm. So the dramaturg sits in many ways at the center of things and has a relationship with a number of different people.
Here's another question sort of along that line. I love you acting with yourself, but let's say there's an Ophelia who has a completely different way into the scene.
Right.
And then the director, can you just talk a little bit about that back and forth in a rehearsal?
Yeah, well, ultimately, yes, you come in a rehearsal, you would come in with your ideas of what the backstory is and how the scene might go, but it would change very much if the Ophelia has an idea that she's had it and she's going to take those remembrances and just toss them on the ground and leave, and that's what you get in rehearsal. Then you've got to react to that, and it becomes a different scene. In rehearsal, it would be very likely that the Hamlet and the Ophelia would try a number of different takes on the scene. Mm-hmm. What the gold standard, what you are aiming for, is for all of the text to be needed. Mm-hmm. Every word is needed to justify or support, undergird what is going on. And that's how you work together toward a particular interpretation. This scene can get to a place where Hamlet is simply shouting and Ophelia is simply crying. Mm-hmm. That happens.
I've seen many.
Yeah, and that's, in my view, not what goes on here. He is really trying to convince her of something, and she is taking it in, and then at the end, which maybe next time or sometime we'll get to, oh, what a noble mind is hero thrown. If all she wanted to do was cry, she'd just cry. But she has text, has a lot of text. And it's beautiful text and difficult text. And she's left alone on stage, which, as we know from last time, she's probably taken that to the audience. Say, guys, did you see what I just did? I don't know what to do with this. And right when she leaves it with that, in comes Claudius with the first word, love. And the focus goes right to Claudius, and Ophelia can release out of it. Mm-hmm. And it's beautifully written theatrically for that reason.
Yeah. I'm just taken to this idea of her tears and then her death and the water and all that just so beautifully.
Well, let me jump in on this because I want this down somewhere for posterity. There was a dramaturg and director at the Old Globe named Diana Maddox, who is not remembered as well as she should be. This is the Old Globe Shakespeare Theater in San Diego. And this is when I was in grad school in the mid-'70s. And Diana came up and gave us a lecture over 2 days about Shakespeare, said many things. But one of the things she pointed out was that Ophelia says, "My lord, as I was sewing in my closet." Huh. So what do we know? She sews, which means she does very fine work, yeah? And how's the light in, like, Elsinore? maybe not so good. Maybe it's dark. And does that mean that maybe her eyesight has been damaged because of all this fine work she's had to do in the half dark? And and as Diana went on to say, and is that the reason that she fell into the river at the end? Because her eyesight wasn't so good, she couldn't really see where she was going. But the point Diana was making is that when you're thinking like an actor, you take a small detail like that and you can bring a character to life. If it's a modern play, does she wear glasses? And is that why? And is that, you can build a coherence in the character. Juliet, Declan Donnellan points this out in his book. Juliet says, the orchard walls are high and hard to climb. How does she know? Has she climbed them? Is there a bit of a tomboy in her? Is she one to see a barrier and want to overcome it, like this barrier between the Montagues and Capulets? Does that feed into her character? When you're thinking like an actor, you take these little nuggets that you're given and you plant them like seeds and you let them grow, and you get a specific and particular kind of character out of these details.
Oh. Last question for tonight from Judith Jones. How much time is spent in rehearsal discussing and hashing out these interpretations?
Usually there's what we call table work, which is 2 or 3 days sometimes around the table, where we all make sure we're on the same page.
For me, it's an entire week.
Say again?
I said, if you're me as director, it's an entire week.
Okay, fair enough.
I love table work, although these days there's less and less time for it as our...
That's right. That's right. And I will say, when I was doing Mary Stuart at the Folger with Richard Clifford, there was no table work.
At all.
It was like first day on our feet. Here we go. So, but in answer to the question, there may be, likely is, several days of table work where we are reading the play, we are agreeing what the words mean, sketching in the world of the play. What period is it? What effect may that have on what we're doing? But then we're up on our feet. Then a scene like this in a normal rehearsal period might get, what would it be? In a big play like this on a 4-week rehearsal, it might get 2 hours of rehearsal total before we go into run-throughs, maybe 3 hours, because there's a lot of play to rehearse, and this is a two-hander. So this is an easy scene, I mean, in some ways. For the director, because there's a lot of scenes that take a lot more staging than this. So this is where you rely on your colleague, your professional colleague, who understands if she's playing Ophelia, or if he's playing Hamlet, or now these days if she's playing Hamlet. There are more and more female Hamlets, and you understand that what needs to happen in a very efficient way. That may be a good definition of being a professional, is you get further into the scene more efficiently. You know what's going to bear fruit and what isn't.
Yeah.
And you go for it in that way.
Wow. Well, again, that is, to me, at the essence of what good training is that with actor training, that depth and efficiency of depth is really the tool, is in your toolbox to be able to do your work, no matter what kind of director you're working with, whether you have a dramaturg or not, whether you have, to be not self-sufficient in the I'm alone way at all, but really well learned and well versed in what you can bring to the table, which of course you are an exemplary demonstration of on every front. So thank you again. And I haven't gotten to read as I've been listening to you, but thank you everyone who wrote in, and I will look through these afterwards, and Ray, we can decide whether we continue with this or move on, but clearly people are very, very excited by what you have to offer. If there will be another one of these next month, so look out for that. This Friday, if you are still in the mood for something different, is the second episode of Virtually Viv, a series where I get to interview incredible artists about where they're at and what they're thinking about right now. And Sunny Kelly will be joining me this Friday at 7:30. And please register for that. And if you haven't seen his show, The Talk, the production that Street Signs and Bulldog Ensemble presented earlier this year, which is fabulous, and PlayMakers has been presenting it in partnership with them for free. You can go to our website to find that as well, and our YouTube channel. Watch it. It's a beautiful and important piece to watch right now. And then on Friday, I'll be in conversation with him. So I hope you'll join. Before signing off, if you are with us, it also means that you are aware that the performing arts are in an unprecedented moment of hibernation and rediscovery. And while we know that absolutely nothing replaces the need or the experience of being in communion together next to one another, we at PlayMakers are very hard at work to make sure that we remain an access point for sharing our craft, like Ray Dooley did so beautifully tonight. And most importantly, telling stories that help us understand who we are and what we are going through, which is a lot. And of course, none of that is possible without your support. So to learn about what we hope is coming your way in the 2021 season and how you can support PlayMakers, visit our website at www.playmakers.org. Thank you for being here tonight. That support is also crucial. And we look forward to seeing you both online and back at the theater soon. So my traditional sign-off, Ray, if you will join me, I'll just say, I'm Vivienne Benesch, and I'm a playmaker.
I'm Ray Dooley, and I'm a playmaker.
And good night, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Bye.